some stuff.
Do you guys ever have one of those days or weeks where stuff just starts breaking and you're like, now what?
Let's see if we can get this thing. Oh, it's gonna be stuck. We got to put something on that. She builds pressure. Let's see if we can service it. I need it. I have an idea.
So my main compressor, the old Worthington Dayton combo, it's throwing belts. And so a closer look and I see that the motor that I put on there, different motor than what was originally on this mount, it broke off its mount. So that needs to be fixed in this episode. And I'm going to show you guys what I'm going to do there. But I can't fix that really because, and I don't have another air compressor. So the other thing that I wanted to do was try to set up at least like a little portable air compressor or as a backup because, you know, things get old like me. And the house is old and a lot of the equipment is old. I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the Worthington, but I just want to mention that this little guy, we're going to see if we can fix it. And if not, we're going to modify it just so I have a backup compressor, something. It's a little one that Mikey gave me and it wasn't working right, and so we're just going to take a look at these. These are these oilless ceramic compressors that I'm going to take a look at that in a minute.
I see something on there. It says October 27, 1997. So she's been around for a while. What I'm seeing is it looks like it's dry. I can hear it when it's running. It kind of tries to like stall. I hear squeaky. I was afraid to run it any longer. I thought it was going to burn out. Why don't we take some lubricant and, you know, after all these years, you think it would be dry, right? We'll blow it out, but let's get some, you know, just regular, good old-fashioned lubricant. My 6-in-1. And we'll hit a few spots. And I'm probably in, you know, here's the big bearing over here. Right, and then we'll get some on that as well. And stand back. I'll plug it in from here. From a safe distance, I'll let you guys be the victim. What's that? Okay. Why is it doing that? That's weird. Clean up those contacts. Oh, there it goes again. See? So what's doing that? Isn't that weird? This is actually the heat sensor, right? It's just a thermocouple. And so what I did was I moved it. It was in here, tied up against the coil. And I'm just moving it back out of the way. And what we need to do next is mount this back into the enclosure carefully and get that fan blowing over it. And I think it should be okay. Right, still doing it. All right, let me take that back off, and we're going to get rid of that sensor. All right, I got it up to about 100. I can smell it. It's hot and it's smoking. So for some reason or another, the motor part is dead. It shouldn't be getting that hot. You can see some smoke coming out of it. She's hot. All right, she's red hot. Why is it doing that? I don't know. That can happen to them. They're not made very well. So I'm going to call it on this one, but we have a regulator. We've got one of these controllers on there. That's good. And yeah, that's it. All right, there was a plug in here, you know, just a regular plug. So I pulled that out and I put a tank drain. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull this off. We know this works, so I'm going to put that to the side. And I got this little anvil compressor, which I got from my buddy. There was something wrong with it, and I fixed it. I don't remember what was wrong with it. It was electrical or something inside. But, you know, it's such a small little nailer compressor. It has no volume. So we're going to tap off of here with a little extension. Bring it into the top when I take this off, and then the output will be on this side that we can plug an air hose in. All right, so here's the thinking. So this just lays on here, and to tighten it up, I'm still tightening it, but I just kind of want to tighten them all up together. That way you don't over tighten it. So I ran this one in a little bit, but, and you'll see what I'm doing in a minute. And then I'm going to put standard connector over here, push connector there, put a clamp on that, and then we'll test it. And I think this tank size is about appropriate for this little compressor. That way it has a chance to fill up. All right, now this one I got from my late buddy Don. This is a much bigger machine, you know, as a nail, a small compressor. It's a DeVilbiss, and it's a 3-gallon, 1.5 horsepower, and you can see it's the same kind of setup. So we can use that too. That's a little bit more industrial. It's got a little more oomph. Let's try the little guy first, though, and then we'll deal with this in a bit. But that way I know. Now this guy, right? We could probably prop up right there. Hopefully it won't fall off. But maybe we put a bungee cord. And then I got this, right? So just doubled up. All right, it's going up. Let's let it go. That sounds weird. There it goes. I think that one's better. I see a small leak here. The drain valve was leaking a little bit on the DeVilbiss, but just a good tight. Remember, some of this stuff hasn't been used in forever. That's leaking, but I think once we shut it off, it should be all right. I don't hear any other major leaks or nothing. It's going to weep a little bit because it's old stuff. Feels good. And what we might want to do is take this one apart. Hold your ears. And oil it, right? Oil the bearings and stuff like I did on the other motor, and, you know, not touch anything else. And take a look and see if the piston and the seal is the same. They are rebuildable. Geez, it looks so much the same. It really does, right? It looks like it's the same damn thing. Oh, let me get the other one. Well, not really, but look, it's got the mystery switch here, switch cover. So does this one. This one has a mystery switch cover somewhere. Where did I see it? It's over here. Right? So it's got that. Oh, I gotta clean my camera. Ooh, I'm gonna do that. I mean, they're close. Yeah, see? There's one here. It's over there. It's similar. The mount is a little bit different. This one said it was 2 horsepower, so that was 1.5. Could be a similar piston. Right, this piston was in good shape. It's the motor that's no good. So we might want to look into that. I think so far so good, right? It took a little while to fill up, but not terrible. All right, this way I got something to work with. All right, I just had a piece of scrap wood out there. I put a couple of zip screws in. I bent those tangs down, the ones that the motor slides into. That way it would fit a little flush. And I zip screw into the bracket. Just found some screws just good enough for that. Just missing the tank. And then, you know, something like that, right? That way they can store it like that. And then another neat little feature too of this is that I can fill it from my main compressor when I got that working again. And I can wheel it outside and fill up some tires. And so like a gentleman, right, I can just, pick it up, move it around. It's not going to go anywhere. It's on feet. And you just got to close the valves. Okay. All right. I think that's good enough. I got to check to see if the package came. What do you think? That's good. And I just kind of broached the corners a little bit so I don't run into it with my leg, and got rid of some splinterage. And the funny thing is that what was on there was a 2 horsepower with a 12-gallon tank. And this is just a 1.5 horsepower motor on a 3-gallon tank. So that's now 15 gallons. So it's almost the same motor that was originally on there. And it looks like the gauges pretty much work, right? So I would leave this regulator wide open, and then we can adjust that regulator down there if I want to regulate it. Let's say you need to spray something or whatever, if you just need to regulate it. But generally speaking, I don't need to, and I have other regulators. The only thing it needs, fellas, is it needs a water trap, and I may have one. So if I want to, and this is another possibility, right, because you have a bracket here, and you don't even really need the bracket. But this is a regulator with the 2 ports. You got a gauge port. And you don't really need, for this setup, you don't really need a tank, but you got one here, right? So you got a gauge port goes in this direction, and you have a filter and a water separator. So if you really wanted to, I could update this way. And probably could just do a longer bung here. And let me see if I have any other gauges. I could put a better gauge on it. And I'd have an actual nice little small compressor for something. That's not bad. All right, next. Now I can't weld yet because I'm having issues with the electrical box, the breakout box, load center, and that's going to be a different video. And I kind of got it working enough to supply the 220 I need for the air compressor and the welder. But the garage area is got no power and things are real iffy. And like I said, that's going to be another episode. So that's a problem that I have to deal with while I'm trying to deal with these 2 compressors. All right, we're going to take a look downstairs and I'm going to show you guys what's down there that we're going to have to fix that. Now, I just wanted to show you a few pics of the old Worthington. I didn't do any videos back then, but it's an old Worthington and a very worthy Worthington. And well, I think the motor went on fire. I just had another compressor motor burn out. Lovely. That's the last one too. I got 1 spare motor for 2 compressors. Probably from the issues with the transformer blowing up and then whatever, out on the pole. Anyway, that motor was huge, and it was like a 1.5 horsepower or something. and the compressor head was a 2-stage, and that weighed, oh my god, between the motor and the head, that's probably like 300 pounds, right? I think the motor was like 80 pounds, and the compressor head was about 100 and change. Like I needed help to get it up and out of the basement, and it wrenched my back doing it. I bet you if you had a machine shop or something, I don't know if there's any parts available. Really with that, it's the seals and the bearings and such, or bushings, right, went bad on it. And of course you need to re-ring it because it was losing compressive power. So the rings were probably bad. So I just put this little Dayton head on there that I got from a boss of mine when I was a very young man, and he gave me this cool Dayton compressor. You'll see a little bit of it. And that one actually got damaged. It ate a screw, and I had to weld the piston. And anyway, and then this motor replaced another motor, and this motor came from something a customer gave me that was left outside, and it has some damage to it. And I managed to get it working, and I had to make the mount for it. And so we're going to take a look at that and see if we can get all that running again. This is what happens with budget stuff, right? When you're doing things for yourself and you have a lot of old stuff and you're throwing it together. I haven't had too many problems with any of this stuff. It runs every day, all day. So a lot of use has been gotten out of these pieces of equipment. So let's go take a look at what's down there. And I just wanted to show you guys some pictures of the old Worthington. I kind of fixed it up. It had a leak in the tank, and I welded the tank. Don't ask how I got it down there, right? And I think I mentioned that my friend Steve gave me a hand putting it down there. And yeah, he's threatened to never help me again on anything like that. Like we're not taking that out, but we'll see. Maybe because if I have to move, right? I kind of like that tank, and boy, if I go to get it out, I'm going to try and film it. I'll see you guys in a bit. So I got the new belt in. Where's the number? I wanted to do a comparison to the old belt, but I don't know where it is. It's been a couple of days. I thought it was downstairs and it got thrown off. It can't go very far. I'll bring you down there and I'll show you. You can see the ribs. It's ribbed for her pleasure. And they're pretty deep as we descend down into the depths of hell. So it couldn't have gone very far. It's a small little basement. Quite practical indeed. You can see I've got all kinds of junk in here. And there's the other compressor motor. That motor has got issues, not sure why it has issues, so we got a couple more controllers. That was the original Dayton tank. And of course I've got that little air tank over there, which is useful for filling up tires and whatnot. But now I don't need it because I've made this other machine. I had to do some welding on the tank. It doesn't leak. I set it up with an automatic drain valve, and that's that sound that you hear, and then a manual drain valve. This is obviously a different motor. It's a couple of horsepower. I had some issues with an adjuster belt, the adjuster bolt, and I made up a new bolt, and I put it on a different sled, and I reinforced it, and it was moving, and I thought that was why it was throwing the belt. So that's been improved. So what I have to do right now is loosen up these bolts and shove the whole motor forward towards the pump and put the belt on, because this is a slightly shorter variant. So that's something I'm going to do. We'll get some rags. I'll wipe it up in here. It's actually quite a good industrial setup, and it allows for putting a much larger pump head on. Even that motor, which I think is a couple of horsepower, can afford to run a bigger pump than that. So that is something in the future. And if I have to take it out of here when I move, it's on skids, and we can winch it up with a car or a tractor or something. Anyway, let me get that together, and I will see you guys back in a little bit. All right, so I had to take the mount out. And so last time I was having a lot of problems with this, and now that seems to be on there, although it might be a good idea to reinforce it. I had to modify the bracket. This motor bracket was different than the original bracket. It was a different motor. And then I made this collar here, which we can see did not work, right? It's not, that's what was eating up the belt. That happened last time, and of course it must have happened again. But if you look on the other side, like you really kind of need something a little bit longer. And then if you look on that side, see how I used a bushing that was a little bit longer? And we're going to reinforce that. I changed the belt. I had to change a number of things because I didn't have what I needed. And sometimes you're working under pressure, right? So I want to get all this cleaned off. I'm going to take this motor off. I'm going to wash this down so there's no grease on it. We'll bring it outside, get all the grease off of it. I'll find some new piece for the collar. And then the other thing I want to do too is it's almost impossible to get these kinds of bolts out. Sometimes they start spinning, and then what will happen is you have to grab them with a vice grip, and then it damages the threads, and then if you have to take it apart, you can't get the nut off, and you just keep fighting everything. So the thinking is, it's the same thing with these bolts here. It was a pain in the ass to get it off. So the thinking is if you go with a taller bolt, we'll cut 2 flats or whatever. 2 flats would probably be the easiest thing to do. And then chamfer the threads and give some room to it. And that way you can hold it with a vice grip or a pair of pliers and keep the shank or the bolt itself from spinning so you can tighten the nut. So I need 8 pieces of hardware like that. I think we could work with these for sure. It looks like there's about enough, at least on 3 of them. So I've got my work cut out for me. Fortunately, I got this little guy, this little air compressor rolling. and I still have to deal with the electrical issues. But last night I was able to get at least half of the system here working. I still have about half of the system out. So I still have to get to the electrical stuff. All right, let me keep moving. So I made up a different bushing. Let's see if we can fit it in. It's a little longer, and that'll give it a bit more support. It's not as thick, but it should work. And then over here, just kind of try to shove it in and get it through all the way to the other side. I'm gonna need both hands. Line it up, and then, like I said, it's not as thick as this one or the other one. I'm a little concerned about that, but I think if we build up the weld or make something to help hold it better, or just get more weld. Everything is cleaned, guys. I use the air compressor and my grinders and everything, and it'll super clean. And now after I'm set up, we'll put a little bit of brake cleaner on it, wipe it down with a tissue, and then I'll weld it. So there should be no oil. Now you can see why I welded it from the back and not from the front. It was just no reason. And it's supported well, and it's got an arc to it, and it's supported. So I think we're okay. Well, just a little update. So you can see when I start fabricating, everything starts to come out, right? And I have stuff outside on the work table outside, and I'm using the grinder over there in the dark because that room doesn't have full lighting. But I do have additional lighting should I need it. I can bring it to bear. All right, it's the next day. So I even added a spacer in there. Came out good. This way it doesn't move back and forth. It's supported well, right? Be less stress on everything. There's a lot less movement here. And so I put a little bit of oil in this back bearing, which is an actual bearing, a little bit up front. I'm just going to clean those grooves out a little bit, and I'll probably go down and do the same thing to the flywheel. And these got painted, so I got to figure out how to mount these next. And then the hardware package, same thing. Like I said yesterday, I just ground those and chased everything out, but I also ground these tips. These are actually Briggs motor bolts to fasten the motor to the chassis, but they're perfect. They're the right length, 3/8. So I think we've got a good hardware package here to work with. Not too bad. All right, I'm just prepping out what's downstairs. All right, what I have, I don't know how focused it is, but what I have is this square. This is a framing square. So I'm going to lay it flat, and then I'm going to measure back. It's hard to hold the camera, so I'm going to do that now. And I rearranged all the brackets to do this. Because when I first set it up, right, you know, the original pump died, the motor. And so I just kind of, mostly by eye and with some basic measurements, I mounted this pump from the Dayton that I've had for years as my old boss, Eugene. I miss him, Gene, really. So he gave me all that. So I just flipped all these brackets around to try to find a better location point, because this moves on to both axes, so I can get this motor now where I need it to be. I thought it was close, but that was in part what was stressing the belt out. So now we have a new problem, right? Because the belt is closer, it's not as long of a belt, and it's starting to hit here. All right, I got it tightened up and adjusted, and it's a little close. I think what I might do is come in, I'm going to run it real quick just to see. But I think if the belt starts to, you know, stretch or whatever, it could hit that. What I might do is just kind of come in with the hacksaw, you know, sawzall, and then my grinder, and just dress it and just get that little bit more clearance without having to take anything off, right? So I could probably get in there. I'll take the belt back off in a minute. Things are kind of snug. I want to do a test run. Let me see what's going on with it. The motor's all on there, tight. Everything is tight. Tight. It's tight. Pump is lubed. I got oil on it. I checked the head bolts for tight. I cleaned the makeshift air filter because I don't know what happened to the original one. And everything should be good to go. Let's just plug it in and see what happens. Oh, cross your fingers. Ready? Get it! Let's let it run. Nice and quiet. Well, it looks like it's all right. Sounds better. Sounds happier. All right, slowly building pressure. So this is just another filter here. And it rarely ever gets any water in it. We got a shut-off valve there. I could use one more tap. I'm going to regulate it here. So I got regulated and unregulated in this area, and gauges on both ends. But it could use one more tap. But that's not a bad place for it. And then over here is a dryer. It's a refrigerant dryer. I was fooling around with this. It's got a crack in it, and I was trying to glue it. That's why it's leaking. I can see it now. So I don't think it's going to work. I'm going to put this one in. The only thing I don't like about this one is it's got a smaller hole. That was leaking too much, and then the thing keeps kicking on, and these things are expensive to run. I hear some air. And we're going to want to find out. All right, so we got leak down there. Something's leaking. Poor man's mill. Done. All right, it's a couple of days later. So I put this on at the end of that 2 days ago. I put this on, the epoxy. It's got a crack in the plastic, and it's just below this lip. So all I got to do now is I got some epoxy on there. We're just gonna remove it real quick, and then I'll bolt this back together. I got to go back down there and swap everything out. If this doesn't work, then I'll order something new. Maybe even remove it, because I do have the one up here, but believe it or not, this catches a lot of the junk coming out, and the water as well, because it's still quite hot, and it's keeping it out of the piping and the hosing. Finishing up. So I realigned the belt. I just moved out the pulley a little bit, and that should help. Okay, I made a little cut on that offending angle there, and that's all I could get the blade on, but that should help. And that other area here, this is kind of rounded, but it's not going to wobble. It's pretty tight, so that should be okay. Clean up the oil, and I probably should have prepared the plastic a little bit better for the epoxy. You know, I cleaned it, but probably should have scuffed it with some sandpaper and some Scotch-Brite. But it seems to be holding. There's pressure on it. I don't know how much. I have a good estimate. I turned these main pipes in a little bit more. I see a little bit of weep here. Even though I've turned it in more, it's got a tiny little bit of weep. That happens. It's black pipe. Sometimes that happens with black pipe, especially going into brass. Even though I turned it a little bit more, sometimes the only way to fix that is to take it apart again. I had that issues, by the way, with natural gas. I ran a lot of the natural gas in black pipe, and you have to take it apart and redo it. But that's okay. That's a very small leak there. So we can wire this now. Over here, all I had to do is I blew out that copper tube. That's the sensor tube from this valve here. It's a specialty valve. And that overpressure valve was leaking a little bit, so I just kind of turned it and moved it up and down a few times to relieve the pressure and turn the valve a little. You can actually hear it, but it stopped leaking. Should be good to go. Wiped everything up, checked all around here. Don't see any leaks this way. So I'm going to wire it up and try again. Be checking the belt alignment and looking for vomit, oil vomit. May also be full, a little too high. It'll puke. Let's see. We're going to find out a little bit. All right, it's pretty hot, but they get hot. It smells cleaner because they sprayed that cleaning solution on it. It's just soap. Well, the belt's on. I made another adjustment to that pulley, shoved that little pulley out a little bit more because the belt was walking backwards, which is fine. So we're real tight on measurements. I tightened it up a little bit more. I don't want to pull any more tightness on it because it is a new belt. We'll have to keep an eye on it. So what we have here, this, like I said, this is the old Worthington. I'll try and find some pictures. So power comes from my switch upstairs, which is my control leg, which is over here. And that's basically putting 220 to this motor. And it puts it through this, all right? That's your regulator unloader. So when it gets to a certain pressure, from this sensor tube, right, it acts on a set of relays and contacts, and it says, all right, we've hit the set point, which is adjustable by, up underneath here, there's that adjustment for it. And it says, I've got it set to 120 pounds. That's more than enough for an old system like this. Now, the unloader pulls air out of the line over to the head so that when the motor goes to start up again, if it just needs to top it off, right, it's not working under load because it'll never be able to spin up against the pressure of that pump from a static point. So that's how that works. And I think I have it set to come on around, I don't know, 90 PSI, something like that. I don't remember. But that seems to be fine. This is the output side. It just goes down to a hose and a quick disconnect to charge the rest of my system. Got your shut-off valve over there. That's your water separator, oil and water and yuck separator. I think it's leaking just a touch, but I don't hear it. You'd hear it. You'd hear the leaks down here. They were loud. Over here is your safety blow-off. That gauge kind of works, but not really. Again, this is a specialty valve, right? It's a one-way check valve. So it's how you allow the blow-off. And this came from the old compressor. I have another one. So this is nice. It makes this a little bit cooler. If you can cool the air before you get it into the tank, you'll get a lot less water in the tank. And so this is controlled effectively by this switch. So when this switch tells it to come on, it goes over to here, and I'm plugged into that. So that outlet is only on when there's a call. And that motor had an issue where it burned out the wafer boards on the contacts, and I had to rig up some special contacts, and I potted everything with, I think, hot glue gun stuff. And that's been working fine. So again, another used piece. Down here, we have a programmable release valve for the pressure. It's just a tank drain. You guys hear it all the time. And of course, a manual drain. And it pisses out a lot. It gets damp down here. Not a great place for a compressor, but it's quiet and it's mostly out of the weather, except for when it rains really hard. Occasionally I'll get water in here, but it's also damp in here. So that's what helps to control the water. And that water trap, believe it or not, up over there, it actually captures a lot, and I almost never get any water in that other trap upstairs at the manifold assembly. So that's it for the Worthington. I think we're going to keep an eye on it for the rest of the day. I think we're okay. So another thing I did was I changed the wiring in here because it's 220 volt. And also because, well, let me stay on point. I did it a standard way, and I broke one leg, but occasionally a ground loop would occur. And the motor would stay running because it was pulling the other side of the 220 leg for either the neutral or the ground. And it wouldn't happen all the time, which was weird. But this way is double pole, double throw. I break both hot legs down to the compressor. It's off, right? And the light is there to remind me that she's on. And that's really more for shooting videos, because as I'm walking around, I get distracted. I can look over and go, oh, well, I left the light on. Let me shut the compressor off so it doesn't come on while I'm narrating something. But on a budget, things are going to get more expensive, guys. And some of the older equipment has its merits, and I show that in this channel. It's mostly what I do is try to show old equipment and what we can do with it. Things on a budget. I have no choice but to be on a budget. I think most of you guys are the same. And the spirit of some of the older equipment, it was made differently in a different time. We now live in a very much of a throwaway society, and that is changing. As you can see, prices are going up, but quality is not going up. And you can still buy quality, guys, but now you have to pay even more for it. So I'll see you on the next one.